Stratocaster has always been one of my favorite guitars, ever since I started playing at 13 years old. I went to my dad one day and I told him that I wanted to start learning how to play the guitar. He then handed me a CD called Texas Flood by Stevie Ray Vaughan, and he told me these exact words: if you want to start playing guitar, you're going to learn how to play it like Stevie Ray Vaughan. I remember hearing the blues and the sounds of Stevie Ray Vaughan as a kid, but I never really took it seriously and really thought about what goes behind that kind of music. But after that day, I started doing my homework and started listening to Stevie Ray Vaughan for the first time seriously. I was really blown away, and I immediately wanted a Fender Stratocaster. Shortly after, my father gifted me a Squier Bullet Strat. I quickly gravitated to the blues at a very young age and found myself in my room for hours on end trying to recreate the sounds of Stevie Ray Vaughan and the bends and vibrato of guys like B.B. King and Buddy Guy. A couple years went by and I eventually upgraded to a Fender Made in Mexico Stratocaster. It was white, just like the one Jimi Hendrix played in Woodstock with a maple fretboard. I played this guitar non-stop and would eventually upgrade the pickups to Texas Special pickups because I thought they sounded very close to Stevie Ray Vaughan and that Texas blues sound. I would go on to start forming my own original bands, and the blues was something that I always incorporated into my original music, which was more rock and metal at the time. While playing in these original bands, I found myself gravitating more to humbuckers and Les Paul style guitars. But eventually I would still find myself wanting to play the blues, and specifically the Texas blues style. When I turned 18, my dad started taking me to blues clubs and bars around town. He had some friends that were musicians and they would let me sit in with their bands. I would continue to do this for many years to come, and my Stratocaster was my main go-to guitar. When I started studying with Berklee College of Music, my interests and style of music started to change. I started to become more into jazz, but still kept a lot of the blues elements that I was used to playing. When I turned 20, I was finally able to buy one of my dream guitars, a Gibson ES-335. I would go on to tour with this guitar, study with Berklee College of Music, and eventually have Johnny Winter sign it after I opened for him at a festival. The Strat sound that I once fell in love with was no longer my passion anymore. I had moved on to more jazzier style sounds, and eventually sold the Mexican Stratocaster that I once loved for parts. That left me with a tremendous gap in the sounds that I was looking for when playing the guitar. One day I decided that I needed to buy another Stratocaster. It had been way too long since I had played one and really missed that sound that I grew up with, the Texas blues sound. So I reached out to a great Stratocaster player that I knew really well at the time, named Matt Schofield. He suggested buying a 1980s Fender Stratocaster that's made in Japan, and specifically a 62 reissue. I thought that was a great idea because I could own a guitar that was somewhat vintage, and I knew that the older Stratocasters were much better than the ones that Fender was producing at the time. I also know that the made in Japan Stratocasters are some of the best quality work that Fender has ever produced. I searched a long time trying to find a good 80s Stratocaster, but eventually found this one on Reverb.com. It was listed in Japan for $1,800 and had all original parts, so I decided to jump on it and have it ordered to my house in South Florida at the time. I got it set up and fell in love with the guitar, but it never really got the sound that I was looking for, that Texas blues sound. And for years, I disregarded this guitar and was not happy with it. Recently, I took this guitar out of the case and wanted to play around with it and was still not happy with it. So I decided that I was going to take it to Carter Vintage Guitars in Nashville to get set up and to have it also authenticated for the first time by me as well. Then after I could decide if I really liked it or not, and if I didn't like it, then I would probably sell it. Carter Vintage Guitars was great and called me to come pick up the guitar a couple days later. When I went in, they fully authenticated the guitar and proved that every single one of the parts were original. They also priced the guitar, and to my knowledge, the guitar had come up in value almost double and was worth $2,500 to $3,000 now. So this got me thinking, here's a guitar that I was ready to part with that is sought after by so many people, and it's 2022 now, so that makes this guitar technically 40 years old and pretty much a vintage instrument. So I went home and I plugged it in and wanted to hear how this guitar would sound in the studio. And to my amazement, this guitar sounded incredible and finally sounded and played the way I dreamed and wanted it to play from the beginning. I had noticed that the guys at Carter Vintage Guitars dropped the pickups down a little bit, and now the pickups have a lot more clarity. Before they sounded kind of wanky, but now they sound really incredible. Carter Vintage Guitars in Nashville, Tennessee brought my Stratocaster back to life. It plays better and sounds better than it ever has before, and I'm definitely glad that I didn't sell this guitar. Being that this guitar is now 40 years old, I'm sure it has many stories, but my story has only just begun with it, and I'm looking forward to many great years with this guitar in the future. Thank you for watching. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel because it helps a lot with the algorithm. And I'll catch you all in the next one.